Imagine waking up one morning, stretching your arms, stepping outside, and realizing the universe might be about as three-dimensional as the reflection on your bathroom mirror. The trees, the clouds, the neighbor who insists on mowing his lawn at sunrise. What if all of them are part of a grand cosmic projection? Not an illusion in the sense of someone pulling a prank on us, but an illusion the way a hologram is an illusion, a three-dimensional world born from two-dimensional information. It is the kind of idea that makes you pause mid-coffee sip and wonder if you should be taking reality a little less literally. Good evening, curious minds. I truly hope you will enjoy today's video. Before we begin, leave a comment and tell me where and when you're tuning in. And if you find yourself learning something new as you drift towards sleep, consider subscribing, but only if you enjoy these calm journeys through the universe. Now let's begin. The holographic universe is one of those scientific concepts that sounds like it escaped from a late-night conversation between a physicist and a philosopher who both had too much espresso. But here is the twist. It is not just wild speculation. It is a serious thought shared by very real scientists who usually prefer chalkboards to cosmic poetry. They look at the universe and whisper, "This entire thing might be a clever trick." If the universe is a stage, then we are standing on scenery that might not be as deep as it appears. Picture an actor walking confidently toward what looks like a solid brick wall, only to discover it is just painted wood. Except in our case, the props are galaxies, star clusters, and the laws of physics. Now, to be clear, this idea does not mean the universe is fake. It is not suggesting we are trapped inside some intergalactic theme park or that a cosmic teenager left the projector running. Instead, it is proposing something more subtle, that the deepest level of reality might live not where we think, but on a faraway surface. It is a little like realizing your favorite three-dimensional movie is stored as a flat disk, yet somehow contains entire worlds. If someone told you that all of existence, from atoms to galaxies, is ultimately written on a distant cosmic boundary, you might laugh, then pause, then wonder whether your laugh is also part of the projection. What makes this idea so deliciously strange is how it reshapes our sense of depth. When you move your hand through space, it feels solid, thick, full of texture. But imagine if space is more like the universe's version of a special effect, the kind that looks perfectly real until someone reveals the trick behind the curtain. That is the unsettling charm of the holographic universe. It makes you question the thickness of existence itself. The world may feel endlessly deep, but perhaps it is just impressively dressed information pretending to take up more room than it actually does. And if this makes your brain vibrate like it just stepped too close to a subwoofer, you are not alone. The concept forces us to rethink the way we measure reality. We humans love depth. We love distance. We love saying that star is ridiculously far away because it makes our cosmic neighborhood feel grand and dramatic. But imagine if that dramatic depth is more of a narrative device than a built-in feature. Picture the universe as the world's most committed storyteller, projecting complexity from a surface you will never touch. If galaxies were characters in a play, the holographic idea is the revelation that the backdrop is hiding the entire script. It is also weirdly comforting in a cosmic roller coaster kind of way. If the universe is a hologram, then everything is connected at a level we do not directly see. The surface, the mysterious cosmic sheet where the fundamental information might live, could be the real powerhouse behind everything. The three-dimensional universe we experience could be the result of that surface vibrating with data, much like a drum makes sound by shaping invisible waves. You would never look at a drum and assume the sound came from inside the drum. It comes from the surface. Now imagine the universe working the same way, except instead of producing music, it produces reality. And here is the part that makes this idea cling to your imagination like cosmic glitter. If reality is a projection, then depth, time, and even physical matter become things that emerge from something more elementary. They become features, not foundations. It is as if the universe installed space and time the way your computer installs background apps, quietly, efficiently, and in a way that makes you forget they had to be installed at all. So this chapter's purpose is simple: to open the curtain, dim the lights, and invite you to sit in the cosmic theater where the universe might be playing tricks on all of us. Whether or not the hologram idea is true, it does what the best scientific ideas always do. It stretches the imagination, tickles the curiosity, and reminds us that the universe is stranger, funnier, and more inventive than anything humans could dream up. And in this particular show, the ultimate question is not whether the universe is real, but how real it needs to be for us to call it home. If the holographic universe sounds like a bold claim, you can thank black holes for being the universe's most dramatic troublemakers. Black holes are cosmic divas. They demand attention, they warp everything around them, and they refuse to follow the normal rules of physics. In fact, they are the entire reason scientists ever considered the possibility that reality might not be as three-dimensional as it looks. The hologram idea did not begin with a philosopher pondering existence or a writer dreaming up a sci-fi plot. It began with a simple, nagging question: what happens to information when a black hole swallows it? Imagine tossing a book into a bonfire. Sure, the pages burn, but the information, the precise arrangement of ink that once described dragons, detectives, or detailed tax advice, technically still exists in the smoke, the heat, the ash. Physics insists that information cannot be destroyed. It can be scrambled, shredded, roasted to cosmic toast, but something about it remains. The universe keeps receipts. Yet black holes seem to break that rule entirely. According to early interpretations, anything that falls into a black hole gets erased from reality, leaving no trace behind. For physicists, this was the equivalent of watching the universe delete files without putting anything in the recycle bin. This problem bugged scientists so deeply that it grew into the famous information paradox, a puzzle that could keep a genius awake for decades. The real spark, though, came from an unexpected direction: the surface area of black holes. When researchers studied how black holes behave, they discovered a wonderfully bizarre pattern. A black hole's ability to store information did not scale with its volume, the inside, but with its surface area, the outer boundary, usually called the event horizon. If that does not sound strange enough, imagine if you judged how much junk you could cram into your closet, not by the size of the closet itself, but by the size of the door. This is the kind of inconsistency that gives physicists the same expression you get when the vending machine eats your money. This discovery suggested that everything happening inside a black hole might actually be encoded on its surface. The interior, with all its terrifying darkness and crunching gravity, might not need to contain information at all. It could all be sitting on the outer skin, quietly holding the cosmic equivalent of notes, sketches, and receipts of whatever has fallen inside. The universe, it turns out, might be better at filing paperwork than anyone expected. But this revelation did not just change black hole physics. It forced scientists to ask a bigger, more unsettling question. If a black hole stores information on its surface instead of its volume, what about the universe as a whole? Could everything inside our cosmos, the stars, the planets, the memories of your 8th grade science fair disaster, also be encoded on some distant surface that surrounds everything? This was the moment physics went from "this is weird" to "this might be the key to reality itself." One of the earliest hints came from the observation that black holes seem to obey laws similar to thermodynamics. They have temperature, they have entropy, which is a fancy way of saying they measure how many microscopic states they can contain. And that entropy depends on the surface area of the event horizon. When this discovery emerged, some scientists stared at the equations as if the universe had just handed them a puzzle box carved by an ancient cosmic artisan. Everything pointed toward a single conclusion. Black holes treat their surface like the only place where information truly matters. If black holes were the universe's secret storage devices, encoding information on their boundaries like a celestial hard drive, then maybe the cosmos follows the same rule on a larger scale. This was more than a theoretical itch. It was a clue, a breadcrumb trail, the kind that leads physicists into deeper forests of insight and occasional mild existential dread. The real shockwave came when scientists realized that the mathematics describing black hole surfaces did not just explain how information could be stored. They hinted at a whole new way to understand space. What if three-dimensional reality is not the fundamental layer at all? What if the real information lives on a two-dimensional surface at the universe's edge, and everything we see inside is a kind of cosmic recreation projected from that surface? That was the moment the hologram idea officially stepped onto the stage, wearing sunglasses and announcing, "Yes, I know I sound ridiculous, but hear me out." To scientists, the most compelling part of the holographic idea was not its strangeness, but its elegance. It tied together different branches of physics that previously looked like relatives who refused to speak to each other. Gravity, quantum mechanics, thermodynamics, they all started humming the same tune when black hole surfaces were involved. It was as if the universe suddenly revealed that its deepest secrets or hiding on the boundaries all along, like notes scribbled in the margins of a cosmic textbook. In a poetic twist, the universe's most destructive objects, black holes, became the reason we might someday understand how reality works at the most fundamental level. They showed us that information clings to surfaces, that depth might be an illusion, and that the cosmos has a sense of humor darker than their interiors. And so the origins of the holographic universe are not found in speculation or fantasy, but in the stubborn refusal of information to disappear, even when swallowed by the most extreme objects nature has ever produced. Black holes tried to hide the truth, but by guarding information on their surfaces, they accidentally revealed the blueprint for a universe that might be thinner, stranger, and far more intricate than we ever imagined. Picture yourself standing in the middle of an enormous landscape, staring at mountains, trees, clouds, and that one bird that always looks like it knows something you don't. Everything around you feels rich and thick and unmistakably three-dimensional. You reach out, you touch, you walk through space, and you trust, without even thinking about it, that depth is real. But now imagine someone taps you on the shoulder and says, "Actually, all of this might be coming from a flat cosmic surface far, far away." That is the holographic puzzle in its purest form, a world that feels deep, possibly arising from information that has no depth at all. To wrap your mind around this without melting your brain like a marshmallow over an open fire, consider a simple metaphor. Think of the universe as a cosmic burrito, but not the kind where all the ingredients are packed inside. Instead, imagine the tortilla holds all the data on the outside, the salsa, the beans, the spicy truths of existence. They are tattooed on the surface. And somehow, from that two-dimensional wrap of information, a three-dimensional world blossoms inside. If this feels like the universe playing a prank with a straight face, you are getting close to the spirit of the puzzle. The mind-bending part is that scientists are not talking about something symbolic or poetic. They mean it literally. The information that defines every particle, every force, every bit of matter that makes you. You might fundamentally live on a surface with no thickness. Our three-dimensional reality could be the universe's way of expanding that surface information into something that feels spacious and interactive. Kind of like how a video game stores its world on a flat disk, yet lets you explore forests, oceans, and cities as if they had depth and maybe slightly better physics than the average game glitch. But our universe does not feel like a game. There are no pixel edges or invisible walls, no moment where the sky accidentally clips through the ground. Everything feels smooth, continuous, and stable. That is exactly why the holographic idea is so wild. It suggests the illusion of depth is far more perfect than anything humans have ever engineered. The universe may hide its backstage with such astonishing skill that we never questioned whether the stage was real in the first place. Now, if you are wondering how two-dimensional information could possibly produce a world as complex as ours, the trick lies in translation. Cosmic translation, the kind that makes Google Translate look like a toddler with a crayon. The universe might work like a projector that takes the flat information on its outer surface and transforms it into the vibrant, ever-changing three-dimensional movie we live inside. You, your thoughts, your memories, the star that exploded before humanity even discovered fire. Everything could be woven from the same flat informational thread, pulled into three-dimensional form by the rules of physics. Think of a shadow. When you wave your hand in front of a light, the wall catches a two-dimensional version of a three-dimensional object. Now imagine flipping that idea. A two-dimensional pattern that somehow generates a three-dimensional world. It is not a projection downward. It is a projection upward, as if the universe is inflating reality like a cosmic air mattress, except instead of air, it uses math, structure, and the deep logic of physics. One of the strangest aspects of this puzzle is how natural it begins to feel once you sit with it. You start noticing that many things we assume are built-in features of reality are actually quite flexible. Space feels like a natural backdrop, but maybe it is more like a detailed set piece. Time feels like an unstoppable river, but maybe it is just the rhythm the universe uses to animate the information on its surface. Even matter might be a sort of textured emphasis, like bolded cosmic text telling you, hey, this part matters. If the idea still feels slippery, think of a painting. Up close, it is just colored dots. Step back, and suddenly you see a beach or a portrait staring into your soul. The holographic principle says reality might be doing the same thing, but on a much grander scale. Up close, the universe's fundamental layer might be nothing more than flat patterns of information. Step inside, and suddenly you find galaxies swirling, atoms vibrating, and humans debating whether pineapple belongs on pizza. The biggest question, of course, is why would the universe work this way? If the cosmos is using two-dimensional information to build a three-dimensional world, there must be some advantage to this cosmic strategy. And while scientists are still teasing out the reasons, one hint is that surface tend to be extremely efficient at storing information. A flat surface can pack data tightly, cleanly, and reliably, like the universe's version of handwritten notes in perfect cursive. From that densely packed layer, creating a three-dimensional world might be easier than we think, especially if the laws of physics are operating like software, reading its own code. It all raises a more personal question, too. If reality's foundation is thinner than a sheet of cosmic paper, what does that make us? The complicated answer is that we are emergent beings, creatures rising from deeper rules that do not need thickness to produce richness. The simpler answer is that we are part of the universe's most ambitious art project, painted onto a surface we will never see, unfolding in a world that feels real because it is real enough to matter. And maybe that is the beauty of the puzzle. It does not cheapen reality. It deepens it. It turns existence into a mystery where the map is flat, but the journey is breathtakingly three-dimensional. The black hole information paradox began as a scientific headache, grew into a philosophical migraine, and eventually became the kind of cosmic mystery that keeps physicists awake at night, staring at the ceiling as if the answers might be written there in glow-in-the-dark ink. It all started with a simple question that should have had a simple answer. What happens to information when a black hole eats it? But black holes, being the overachievers of the universe, refuse to make anything easy. Instead, they turned one of physics' most cherished principles upside down and shook it like a snow globe. To appreciate the paradox, you have to imagine a black hole as the universe's most extreme blender. You toss in matter, an asteroid, a star, a spaceship, an entire season of your favorite show, and the black hole shreds it into unrecognizable bits. But here is the catch. Physics says that no matter how thoroughly shredded something becomes, the information about what it used to be must still exist somewhere. It may be scrambled like cosmic eggs, but it cannot be erased. That is a deeply rooted rule in quantum mechanics, a rule so strict that the universe might as well have it carved on a stone tablet. Black holes seem determined to break that tablet in half. For years, scientists believed that once something fell past the event horizon, the point of no return, the information about it was lost forever. You could throw in a library, and the black hole would swallow not just the books, but the meaning of every word. To a physicist, that is more horrifying than the hole itself. To lose information is to violate the very structure of the universe, as if nature suddenly forgot how to keep track of itself. And in science, forgetting is not allowed. If the universe had a customer service desk, this would be the moment physicists would march up and say, "We demand to speak to your manager." But then another twist arrived from an unexpected source. When Stephen Hawking studied black holes, he discovered something astonishing. They are not completely black. They emit energy in the form of what became known as Hawking radiation. This radiation slowly drains a black hole's mass, like a leaky battery left in a dark corner of the cosmos. Over immense timescales, the black hole shrinks and eventually evaporates, disappearing entirely. And when it goes, it takes all that swallowed information with it. Vanished, gone, like cosmic witness protection, but without the forwarding address. This is where the paradox explodes into full drama. On the one hand, quantum mechanics insists information cannot vanish. On the other hand, Hawking's calculation said black holes show up with an appetite, consume information, and then evaporate without returning what they borrowed. It was as if the universe was breaking its own rules, and physicists could only stare at the equation like it was a confession letter from nature admitting, "Yeah, I destroyed some data. Sorry." The problem was too big to ignore. If information truly disappeared, the foundation of quantum mechanics would crumble. Entire fields of physics would need to be rewritten. The universe would stop behaving like a predictable system and start acting like a cosmic shredder with no accountability. And that made scientists deeply uncomfortable. The universe might be strange, but it is not supposed to be sloppy. The debate grew into a decades-long intellectual battlefield. Physicists gathered in conferences, scribbled on chalkboards, argued in hallways, and occasionally looked as though they were trying to teleport through frustration alone. Some believed Hawking's radiation must secretly carry information away in a highly scrambled form. Others argued that maybe the event horizon was not what we thought, or perhaps information could linger in ways we had not yet discovered. Still others proposed that the paradox might hint at an entirely new structure of space and time. Eventually, the conversation shifted toward a radical possibility. Perhaps the inside of the black hole was not where the information lived at all. Maybe the surface, the event horizon, held everything that mattered. It would not store the information neatly or politely. It would be distorted, stretched, folded into shapes no human could visualize without needing a lie down afterward, but it would not be lost. This was the turning point. If the surface of a black hole carried all the information about what had fallen in, then black holes were not breaking physics. They were revealing physics. They were showing that information could cling to boundaries in ways no one expected. The paradox was not a dead end, but a clue pointing toward a universe that treats surfaces as sacred, as the real repositories of what exists. And that is what makes the black hole information paradox so monumental. It forced physicists to abandon comfortable assumptions and entertain the possibility that space does not operate the way intuition suggests. It hinted that the universe might keep its records not in the depths of things, but on edges and boundaries. The paradox was not simply about black holes. It was about the very nature of survival in a cosmos that loves dramatic plot twists. In the end, the paradox did what all great scientific crises do. It opened the door to entirely new ways of understanding reality. It taught physicists that even in places where gravity is fierce enough to crush stars, information might still cling to existence. It showed that survival is not about avoiding danger, but about finding new forms of resilience. And it reminded everyone that the universe, for all its strangeness, plays by rules. Rules that sometimes take the wildest possible route to reveal themselves. The event horizon is one of those cosmic features that looks simple from the outside, but hides a secret life worthy of a mystery novel. On the surface, quite literally, it appears to be nothing more than the boundary of a black hole, a line in space where gravity becomes so strong that not even light can escape. But once scientists began investigating its properties, they realized the event horizon behaves less like a passive border and more like the universe's greatest data storage device, a kind of intergalactic filing cabinet that never loses a document, misplaces a folder, or overheats from too many downloads. To get a sense of just how strange this is, picture the event horizon as a kind of cosmic touchscreen. Whatever crosses it leaves a trace, not in the form of fingerprints or smudges, but in the form of information woven into the surface itself. The object falling in can be a tiny particle or a giant star. The event horizon does not judge, panic, or even blink. It quietly adjusts its surface area to encode the details, like a librarian expanding a shelf to squeeze in one more book. The interior of the black hole may remain unknowable, but the surface becomes a glowing billboard of what has passed through, even though no outside observer can ever read it in the traditional sense. The genius of the event horizon is that it acts like a one-way membrane. Things enter, but nothing returns. Yet the information about those things lingers, spread thinly across the horizon's surface in a way that defies our everyday expectation of how memory should work. For humans, remembering too much leads to forgetting your grocery list. For the event horizon, taking in a planet's worth of information feels like adding a sticky note to an already massive binder. It does not break a sweat. It does not need a coffee break. It simply records. The key property that makes this possible is that an event horizon grows in proportion to the amount of information it holds. This means that its capacity is not based on what is inside the black hole, but on how large the horizon appears from the outside. It is as if a backpack expanded only when you wrote on the outside of it, leaving the inside irrelevant. When scientists discovered that the event horizon's informational capacity depends on area rather than volume, it was like the universe quietly slid a note across the table saying, "By the way, everything you thought about storage, flip it." That idea alone would have been strange enough, but it pushed physicists to reconsider how surfaces behave in extreme conditions. The event horizon is not a physical wall you can touch or bounce off. It has no texture, no solid shape, and no material thickness. And yet it holds the encoded imprint of everything that has ever crossed it. If this sounds absurd, imagine a soap bubble that somehow contains the biography of anything that touches it. You poke it with a feather, and the bubble not only keeps floating, but quietly stores the feather's life story without bursting. What makes the event horizon even more astonishing is how it manages this recording process without revealing a single clue to the outside universe. The information woven into it is distorted beyond recognition, shuffled so thoroughly that not even the world's most determined physicist could decipher it by staring at the horizon. It is not encrypted. It is scrambled in a language that space itself speaks, a code that refuses to translate into human intuition. And yet, in principle, it is still there. That still there is what saves physics from tearing itself apart. The event horizon's role as a data storage surface forced scientists to reconsider what it means for information to persist in the cosmos. Before this revelation, the idea of a surface storing everything felt like an unnecessary flourish, the kind of detail that only shows up in video games or fantasy worlds. But the event horizon's behavior suggested something deeper, that surfaces in the universe might hold greater significance than we ever imagined. They could be the true guardians of information, the places where reality makes its final stand against disappearance. This view of the event horizon also creates an unexpected sense of cosmic elegance. Black holes, which were once thought to be chaotic maws of destruction, turn out to be surprisingly tidy. They do not lose track of what they consume. They do not rip the fabric of reality by erasing data. Instead, they preserve information on their boundaries, keeping the universe's rules intact even in the most extreme gravitational environments. It is as if black holes, for all their violence, still play by the laws of nature with perfect discipline. But perhaps the most surreal aspect of the event horizon is how it reframes the idea of depth. The horizon is a two-dimensional surface, and yet it can contain the information of a three-dimensional world falling through it. This is the moment where the universe takes a bow and says, "Reality is more flexible than it looks." It suggests that surfaces may not be mere edges. They might be the fundamental layers where the true bookkeeping of existence happens. So the event horizon, once thought of as a simple boundary, becomes a quiet hero of cosmic order, It stands guard around the black hole, holding every trace of what has ventured inward, maintaining the integrity of information, even as gravity crushes space and time. It does all this without fanfare, without spectacle, and without ever letting anything escape its authority. In the great cosmic story, the event horizon is not the villain or the victim. It is the archivist, silent, efficient, and astonishingly powerful, protecting the universe's memories, one falling object at a time. Mathematics is often described as the language of the universe, but when it comes to holography, it feels more like the universe is whispering in riddles. Not the frustrating kind that makes you want to flip a table, but the elegant kind that makes you say, "Okay, that is weirdly beautiful," even while your brain feels like it just attempted yoga for the first time. To understand the mathematics behind holography, without writing down a single symbol, we have to journey into a realm where equations behave like characters in a story, cooperating, colliding, and occasionally revealing secrets that make reality wobble for a moment before settling again. The key to this mathematical adventure begins with something called dimensional efficiency. In simple terms, the universe seems to prefer doing the most with the least. Imagine a painter who can create a detailed landscape using only a tiny index card. Or a baker who can make a 5-tier cake using ingredients that fit on a spoon. That is how holographic mathematics behaves. It takes a world that feels three-dimensional and shows that everything about it could be encoded in a two-dimensional description. It is not cheating, it is optimization at a cosmic level. Now picture a map, not a fancy digital map with blinking icons, but an old-fashioned paper map that folds like a stubborn accordion. A map compresses a vast landscape into a flat sheet. But the remarkable part is that the map still contains all the information you need to navigate mountains, rivers, valleys, and winding roads. Mathematically speaking, holography says the universe might be using a much more sophisticated version of this trick. It stores the full description of a three-dimensional world on a boundary surface, and then it unfolds that data into the three-dimensional space we live in. Just like you trust a map to represent an entire countryside, the universe trusts its boundary to represent its entire interior. To understand how mathematicians discovered this cosmic shortcut, think of them as explorers wandering through dense forests of equations. They were trying to understand how gravity behaves in certain kinds of space, especially curved space. If you imagine gravity as a storyteller, curved space is where it gets extra dramatic. Flat space is calm, predictable, the narrative equivalent of sipping tea on a quiet afternoon. Curved space is more like an opera. Big emotions, big motions, and sometimes surprising twists. As physicists studied the equations describing curved spaces, they noticed something unsettlingly clever. If they translated those equations into a completely different mathematical language, one that lived on a flat surface, they still worked. It was as if a complicated story written in a thick novel could be perfectly retold as a short comic strip without losing any plot. The gravity equations continued functioning faithfully, even when their home dimension changed. It was the mathematical equivalent of watching a three-dimensional sculpture collapse into a drawing, yet somehow keeping all the details intact. This realization led mathematicians to suspect that the universe might be bilingual. It speaks one language inside three-dimensional space and another on a two-dimensional surface. Both languages say the same thing, but they use different phrasing. Think of how you can describe a thunderstorm with words or with music. One uses sentences, the other uses sound, but both capture the essence of a storm rolling across the sky. The mathematics of holography works the same way. The equations on the surface and the equations in the interior are two expressions of one underlying truth. One of the most astonishing features of holographic mathematics is how relationships between things change when moving between dimensions. In 3 dimensions, gravity is the main character, dominating the story with its immense pull. But on the surface, the 2-dimensional layer, gravity disappears entirely from the plot. What takes its place are interactions that behave more like vibrations and patterns than forces and fields. It is a bit like discovering that a fierce lion becomes a calm house cat when viewed from the right angle. The essence is the same, but the behavior shifts dramatically. This translation between dimensions is so smooth and exact that physicists began to suspect something deeper was happening. It was not just a coincidence that equations written in different mathematical worlds could mirror each other. It suggested that those worlds were connected in a fundamental way, almost as if one were the shadow of the other, but a shadow that contains the full richness of the object casting it. Imagine holding a key up to a wall and seeing its shadow reveal every detail so precisely that you could recreate the key from the shadow alone. That is holographic mathematics in action. But the most breathtaking part of the story is how this idea reshapes our understanding of emergence. In everyday life, emergence is when small pieces combine to create something greater, a flock of birds forming patterns in the sky, or individual water molecules creating the sensation of a wave. In holographic mathematics, emergence becomes even more dramatic. A flat surface buzzing with informational patterns can give rise to a 3-dimensional universe with stars, planets, and an unsettling number of people who can recite movie quotes better than their own addresses. The interior world emerges from the surface world, not as a copy, but as a richer, expanded narrative. Through this mathematical journey, you begin to see the universe not as a static structure, but as a dynamic storyteller. It compresses, expands, translates, and reorganizes data with astonishing precision. It creates depth where none existed. It shapes a cosmos from the thinnest possible blueprint. And it performs this cosmic magic through mathematics that behaves less like cold logic and more like a playful illusionist who enjoys making reality blink in surprise. In the end, the mathematics behind holography is not just about equations. It is about the discovery that different descriptions of the universe can coexist, each revealing a different angle of truth. It is a reminder that reality is flexible, layered, and capable of disguising itself brilliantly. And it invites us with a quiet smile to keep exploring the boundaries, because that is where the universe stores its most elegant tricks. String theory entered the scientific stage the way eccentric geniuses often enter dinner parties, a bit late, carrying ideas no one expected, and speaking a language that seems confusing until suddenly it clicks and everyone realizes, oh, this might actually explain everything. At its heart, string theory proposes that the smallest building blocks of the universe are not tiny dots, but tiny vibrating strands, cosmic guitar strings humming out the notes of reality. Every particle we know, every force we experience, is just a different vibration, as if the universe wrote itself using music instead of matter. Once you accept that fundamental particles might be string-sized performers playing in an unimaginable concert, something peculiar happens. You start noticing that the mathematics describing these strings behaves like it wants more dimensions than our world appears to have. Not just a few more, many more. It is as if the universe is quietly hosting a whole backstage area we can never step into, complete with extra directions tucked away like hidden hallways in a cosmic mansion. These extra dimensions are curled up so tightly that even the most powerful microscope imaginable would shrug and say, "Nope, can't see them." This strange architectural design leads to an even stranger revelation. The physics happening deep inside a space with many hidden dimensions can sometimes be completely described by a simpler theory living on the surface of that space. That is where the holographic idea slips in with a confident smile, tapping the equations and whispering, "Look carefully, the boundary knows everything." String theory, in its attempt to unify gravity with the quantum world, ended up stumbling upon a blueprint of how the universe might encode itself, not inside its volume, but on a faraway cosmic edge we will never physically reach. To understand why this matters, imagine holding a snow globe. Inside the glass sphere is an entire scene. A tiny house, a tree, maybe a person who perpetually looks like they regret their plastic career choices. But suppose someone tells you that the entire three-dimensional scene inside the globe can actually be fully described by a pattern carved on the glass surface. You would probably laugh, then check the surface, then laugh again, because it seems impossible. String theory, however, is that persistent friend insisting, "No, really, the surface contains the full story." The way string theory accomplishes this is through its obsession with vibrations. Every tiny string has a mode of oscillation, like a musical instrument playing different notes. When these notes interact, they produce the physics we observe, particles popping in and out of existence, forces stretching and bending space, and the occasional cosmic drama involving stars exploding just to stay interesting. But when physicists studied these vibrational interactions in highly curved spaces, they found something odd. There existed a way to translate everything happening inside such a space into a completely different language, spoken by fields living on the boundary. This boundary is not a physical wall or a place you could fly to with a spacecraft fueled by ambition and snacks. It exists mathematically, like a distant horizon that represents the edges of a higher dimensional space. You cannot touch it, stand on it, or send postcards from it. And yet, string theory insists that this unreachable surface carries enough information to reconstruct the entire interior space down to its tiniest details. In a way, the boundary is the universe's autobiography, written in a language that only the equations understand. The playful part of string theory is how unapologetically bold it is. It says, "Let me explain the entire universe using vibrating strings that live in more dimensions than you will ever experience," and then act surprised when people look confused. But beneath its dramatic flair, string theory accomplishes something deeply practical. It gives physicists a way to talk about gravity when gravity does not want to cooperate. The mathematics governing vibrating strings links gravitational behavior inside a space with field behavior on its boundary, tying together two very different worlds with an elegance that would make a tightrope walker jealous. This connection suggests that our universe might operate similarly. The space we live in, the one full of galaxies, atoms, time, and a shocking number of people who believe they can park perfectly on the first try, could be the expanded version of information stored quietly on a distant, lower dimensional boundary. In this picture, reality is like a story being projected inward from a cosmic surface that holds all the raw data. The interior is the narrative. The boundary is the author's notes. What makes this idea so compelling is its symmetry. The boundary does not control the interior like some kind of cosmic puppet master. Instead, both are linked by a shared mathematical structure. Change something at the boundary, and the interior shifts to match. Change something in the interior, and the boundary adapts too. It is like watching two dancers perfectly mirror each other despite standing on different stages. And so, string theory, with all its complexity and charm, ends up offering a surprising suggestion about the universe. Not only might reality have more dimensions than we can see, but the full description of our three-dimensional world might live on a boundary we will never touch. A boundary that quietly encodes everything, with the calm confidence of a librarian who knows exactly where every cosmic secret is shelved. In its quest to explain the tiny strings that weave reality, string theory may have revealed the grandest trick of all. The universe might be playing out its entire story from the edges inward, writing existence on a distant surface while we live inside the unfolding tale. If string theory hinted that the universe might hide its deepest truths on a boundary, the correspondence between anti-de Sitter space and conformal field theory, often shortened to something unrepeatably technical, was the moment physics looked up from its chalkboard and said, "Wait, this might actually be how the cosmos works." This correspondence is one of the boldest scientific discoveries of the last several decades. It is not a gentle suggestion or a philosophical nudge. It is a full-blown cosmic translator that takes a complicated world with gravity inside a curved space and rewrites it perfectly as a gravity-free field theory on the boundary outside that space. Like discovering that your messy bedroom has a clean, perfectly organized twin living inside your closet wall. To understand this, we first need to imagine a kind of space called anti-de Sitter space. Despite sounding like a villain from a science fiction movie, it is simply a space with a distinctive kind of curvature. Instead of being flat like a table or positively curved like the surface of a sphere, anti-de Sitter space bends inward like the inside of a saddle or a looping roller coaster that never quite levels out. The deeper you go into it, the more the edges curl around you. It is not the universe we live in, but rather a theoretical playground, one that physicists use the way artists use sketchbooks, full of wild shapes and experimental ideas. Now imagine standing inside this curved anti-de Sitter world and looking outward toward its boundary. The boundary is infinitely far away in a very precise mathematical sense, yet it acts like the perfect theater balcony seat from which the entire interior can be viewed. Everything that happens inside this curved space, the movement of particles, the bending of light, the playful mischief of gravity, can be completely reinvented as a new kind of theory that lives solely on the boundary. That boundary world has no gravity at all, yet somehow it knows exactly what the gravitational world inside is doing. This is where conformal field theory makes its entrance. A conformal field theory is a mathematical world where objects stretch and shrink without distorting their essential shapes. It is a place where angles behave politely and scaling does not ruin the scenery. If you imagine a drawing that can be resized endlessly without losing proportions, you have captured the spirit of this kind of theory. And for reasons that still make physicists grin with disbelief, this boundary theory, this gravity-free, shape-stretching playground, manages to describe everything happening in the curved space inside. The shock is not that a new theory exists. The shock is that the correspondence between these two worlds is perfect, not approximate, not metaphorical, not hand-wavy, in the way theoretical physics sometimes needs to be. Perfect. One world with gravity maps exactly onto another world without gravity. It is like two books written in different languages where every sentence, every punctuation mark, every plot twist appears in both, just expressed through a different linguistic lens. To make this feel more real, imagine two radically different scenes. A busy city full of people, skyscrapers, and the general chaos of daily life, and a quiet art studio where someone is painting on a huge canvas. The correspondence says that every event happening in the city, the honking taxis, the swirling clouds, the person dropping their sandwich, could be expressed in principle as a brushstroke on the painting in the studio. And every stroke on that canvas corresponds to some event in the city. The two realities are entirely different in appearance, tone, and behavior, yet they are exact mirrors of each other if you know how to translate between them. This translation is the heart of the correspondence. Think of it as the universe quietly running two versions of the same story, one lush and curved, full of gravitational drama, and one flat and tidy, full of energetic fields woven together in perfect balance. Physicists can hop between these two descriptions like bilingual speakers switching languages mid-sentence, choosing whichever version makes the current problem easier. Want to understand a complicated gravitational process? Translate it to the boundary theory. Want to analyze a messy interaction between fields? Translate it back into the curved interior. The universe hands you two toolkits and says, use whichever one makes your brain hurt less. One of the most miraculous implications of this correspondence is how it reshapes our understanding of depth. The interior of the anti-de Sitter space feels rich, textured, and immersive, while the boundary feels like a thin, abstract sheet. Yet the boundary contains everything, the full mathematical DNA of the interior space. It is as if the universe stitched an entire world into the hem of its own fabric, storing the grand and complex inside the modest and simple. Of course, our universe does not appear to be shaped like anti-de Sitter space. It is expanding, not curling inward, and no distant boundary appears as a cosmic chalkboard for reality. But the correspondence is so powerful, so elegantly constructed, that physicists suspect it hints at a deeper principle that might apply beyond its original setting. It is like discovering a hidden mechanism in a toy, and realizing the same mechanism might operate inside vastly bigger machines. The key insight is this: the world we live in might also have a boundary description, one that encodes everything happening inside, whether or not the mathematics looks exactly like the anti-de Sitter case. The correspondence is a proof of concept demonstration that holography is not fantasy. It is possible. It works. There exists at least one universe, even a theoretical one, where the inside and the outside describe the same reality perfectly. And that is why physicists treat this correspondence like a golden clue. It is not the final answer, but it is a beautiful example of how two completely different realities can be secretly the same story. The universe, it seems, loves translation. It loves telling one tale on a curved stage and another on a flat screen, letting both versions coexist in perfect harmony, even when we cannot quite reach the edges where the truth is written. The universe is usually pretty good at keeping secrets. It hides dark matter in plain sight, tucks black holes into quiet corners of galaxies, and lets quantum mechanics run the microscopic world like a chaotic backstage crew you are never allowed to meet. But every so often, the universe slips. It leaves a clue, a fingerprint, a suspiciously well-timed hint that suggests something deeper is going on. It is almost as if the cosmos is a detective who has grown tired of waiting for us to figure things out and is now scattering breadcrumbs with increasing impatience. And nowhere is this cosmic hint-dropping more enticing than in the faint glow of the cosmic background radiation. This background radiation is the oldest light in the universe. It is the cooled whisper of the Big Bang, stretching across the entire sky like a faded photograph of the universe's childhood. If you could tune an old television between channels, the static you once heard included a sprinkle of this ancient light. It is the universe's baby picture, if baby pictures also came with clues about the fundamental nature of existence. Scientists map this radiation with incredible precision, turning it into a cosmic wallpaper dotted with tiny temperature differences. These little variations are not random freckles. They are the fingerprints of how matter once spread across the early universe. And some researchers have begun to wonder whether these patterns might hold hints that our three-dimensional world is secretly generated from a two-dimensional foundation. In other words, the universe might be leaving subtle reminders of its holographic roots, if those roots exist at all. The challenge is that the radiation is quiet, very quiet. It murmurs rather than shouts. But every now and then, noise turns into a noticeable pattern, and scientists lean closer like detectives who just notice the suspect's alibi has a suspicious glitch. Imagine the universe dropping one eyebrow and saying, "You see that little asymmetry over there? Yeah, I did that on purpose." Some of these patterns come in the form of temperature fluctuations that seem slightly too smooth or too structured to be easily explained by the standard picture of cosmic inflation. These whispers in the data have led certain physicists to ask, what if the early universe was influenced by a holographic blueprint? What if the subtle anomalies in the radiation are the wrinkles we see when a three-dimensional projection is stretched from a two-dimensional source? Kind of like how a movie projected onto a slightly uneven surface reveals faint distortions that don't belong to the story itself. These possibilities are not wild speculation. They arise because holographic models predict that the birth of the universe should leave behind certain statistical signatures, patterns that differ just slightly from the predictions of traditional cosmology. These differences are small enough that the casual observer would never notice, but scientists armed with satellites, finely tuned instruments, and a stubborn refusal to blink at the wrong moment can pick them out like detectives noticing a single misaligned book on a criminal's otherwise perfect bookshelf. One of the most tantalizing hints is that the cosmic background radiation may exhibit correlations that stretch across the sky with more uniformity than expected. In a purely three-dimensional universe, these correlations follow certain mathematical distributions. But if the universe emerged from two-dimensional information, those distributions could shift in delicate ways. It is a bit like hearing a familiar melody played on a different instrument. The tune is still recognizable, but the tone carries a subtle difference that only a trained ear can detect. Of course, the universe is a chaotic artist. It loves noise, randomness, and the occasional cosmic prank. Not every strange pattern in the background radiation is a clue. Some are just the universe being messy. But the real intrigue comes from the fact that holographic predictions can be tested. They can be compared, pixel by pixel, against what satellites like Planck and WMAP have observed. When the predictions line up with the data, even imperfectly, it feels like the universe is tapping the chalkboard, asking, "Are you paying attention yet?" Another potential playground for hints comes from gravitational waves, the ripples in space created by massive collisions. If our universe has a holographic origin, the earliest gravitational waves might carry faint imprints of that structure. These are not the waves detected by observatories like LIGO, which listen for dramatic events like black hole mergers. These would be primordial waves, much older, much quieter, and far more intertwined with the very fabric of early reality. They would carry subtle distortions, echoes of a time when the universe was forming itself from patterns on a boundary. Even the large-scale distribution of galaxies might hold clues. If the universe's three-dimensional structure unfolded from a two-dimensional code, it might produce specific statistical quirks in how matter eventually clustered. These quirks would be faint, like a watermark you only see under the right light. but they could one day provide yet another piece of evidence that the universe has been gently nudging us toward a holographic interpretation. But perhaps the most charming part of this story is how the search feels like a cosmic scavenger hunt. Scientists pore over the sky, analyzing every blip of radiation, every ripple of space, every uneven patch of cosmic texture, hoping to find that one unmistakable clue. And the universe seems willing to play along. It leaves just enough anomalies to keep the conversation going, just enough hints to keep telescopes scanning, just enough mystery to keep researchers arguing over whether these patterns are profound or just cosmic static. If the universe truly is a hologram, then these observational hints are the smudges left behind by the projection process, the tiny imperfections that reveal the mechanism beneath the spectacle. They do not diminish the grandeur of reality. If anything, they deepen it. They tell us that the cosmos might be more intricate, more layered, and more cleverly constructed than we ever imagined. And so the cosmic detective story continues, with the universe scattering clues, like a mastermind who secretly wants to be caught, not out of guilt, but out of a desire to be understood. Quantum mechanics has always been the part of physics that behaves like a magician who refuses to explain the trick. It waves particles in and out of existence, makes objects behave like waves on Tuesdays and particles on Wednesdays, and entangles things so thoroughly that distance becomes more of a polite suggestion than an actual rule. For decades, scientists treated these phenomena as quirks, strange, confusing, but ultimately separate from the grand cosmic architecture. But then something unexpected happened. The deeper researchers studied quantum entanglement, the more it started behaving like the hidden sewing machine of the universe, quietly stitching space together from behind the scenes. To understand why this matters for the holographic idea, we first need to talk about entanglement itself. Entanglement is a relationship between particles so intimate that if you measure one, the other instantly reflects that measurement, no matter how far apart they are. It is as if the universe slipped them matching friendship bracelets at birth and said, "No matter what happens, you two stick together." Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, which is physics speak for "I do not like this at all." But spooky or not, entanglement is real, measurable, and unavoidable. Now imagine entanglement not as a rare phenomenon, but as something woven into the fabric of reality at every scale. Instead of particles behaving independently like actors improvising on stage, entanglement ties them together like an ensemble cast that constantly checks each other's lines. At the smallest scales, everything is entangled with something else. It is less like a network and more like a massive cosmic group chat where everyone is silently reading messages without ever typing a response. This is where the holographic idea sneaks in through a side door. Physicists began to notice that the amount of entanglement in a region of space depends on the size of its boundary, not its volume. This was shocking because everything in classical physics scales with volume, mass, energy, particles. But entanglement? It cares only about the edges. It behaves as though the information in a chunk of space is stored not inside it, but on its surface. Sound familiar? That boundary dependence is the same peculiar behavior seen in black holes, the same mathematical pattern behind the holographic principle, now showing up in the quiet inner workings of quantum mechanics itself. It was as if entanglement were leaving little breadcrumbs identical to those left by black holes, whispering, "The boundary is more important than you think." The real breakthrough came when physicists started viewing entanglement not just as a weird quantum trick, but as the building material of space. Instead of treating space as a static stage where particles perform, scientists began to wonder, what if space itself is constructed from patterns of entanglement? Like fabric woven from millions of tiny threads, the structure of space may arise from the connections between quantum bits of information. Remove the entanglement, and the space might unravel like a sweater that should never have gone through the dryer. This idea took shape in several different ways. One of the most striking was the discovery that the strength of entanglement between regions of space affects the distance between them in a holographic model. In plain language, entanglement acts like the invisible scaffolding that holds geometry together. Increase the entanglement, and two regions draw closer. Decrease it, and they drift apart. This suggests that geometry, the thing we usually consider a fundamental aspect of the universe, might actually be an emergent feature born from quantum relationships. Imagine standing in a room and realizing the walls, ceiling, and floor only exist because a secret network of tiny vibrating connections is actively holding them in place. Space is not the stage. It is the performance. This becomes even more extraordinary when we consider how quantum mechanics handles information. Quantum information cannot be casually destroyed, copied, or stored in a sloppy fashion. It follows strict, almost obsessive bookkeeping rules. These rules turn entanglement into a kind of cosmic accountant, ensuring every interaction is recorded, balanced, and maintained. If the universe really is holographic, if reality is fundamentally encoded on a distant boundary, then entanglement may be the mechanism that pulls that boundary information inward, weaving it into the three-dimensional world we experience. Some physicists describe entanglement as the glue of space-time, but this metaphor understates its power. Glue is passive. Entanglement is dynamic. It constantly shifts, rearranges, and redistributes itself, keeping the universe coherent moment by moment. If space-time is a tapestry, entanglement is the weaver. If the universe is a simulation, entanglement is the code. If reality is a story, entanglement is the narrator whispering between the lines. One of the most striking examples of this is a mathematical discovery showing that certain complex geometrical structures arise only when there is enough entanglement between different parts of a quantum system. Remove that entanglement, and the geometry collapses. This suggests that the shape of space-time itself emerges from the entanglement patterns that link distant points. Without those links, space loses its shape entirely. It becomes a disconnected scattering of points with no meaningful geometry between them. This turns entanglement into something much grander than a quantum curiosity. It becomes the architect of distance. the designer of continuity, the backstage crew that not only sets the stage for reality, but quietly holds the entire set upright while the universe performs. And so, quantum mechanics ends up offering one of the most compelling hints that holography is not fantasy. It reveals that relationships matter more than locations, that edges matter more than interiors, and that the universe may spend more time stitching itself together than we spend trying to understand it. Entanglement is not the universe's weird cousin. It is the secret skeleton of reality, and through its quiet, relentless connections, it supports the astonishing idea that what we see as a three-dimensional world may be a beautifully constructed illusion emerging from a deeper, more fundamental layer, humming far beyond our reach. If the universe truly operates holographically, then space and time, the two things we treat as unshakable parts of existence, suddenly become less like carved stone pillars and more like cinematic special effect, not fake, not shallow, but produced, generated, rendered into existence the way a movie conjures a fully three-dimensional world from a thin film of encoded information. It is a strange idea, the kind that makes you momentarily forget how to blink, because it suggests that space and time are not the foundation of reality, but the result of reality. They are features, not furniture. To understand how wild this is, imagine walking onto a movie set before the actors arrive. The lighting rigs are still off, the background screens are blank, and the props are stacked in the corner like puzzled tourists waiting for instructions. Then someone yells, "Action!" and suddenly the world lights up, the scenery appears real, and the story begins to unfold. In a holographic universe, space and time might behave the same way, not as permanent architecture, but as something that switches on when the universe needs to tell its story. Start with space. We treat space as a giant container, a cosmic storage box where galaxies, planets, and the occasional confused comet move around. But if holography is right, space is not the container. It is the illusion of a container. It is the expanding projection of information encoded on a boundary we can never touch. The distances we measure, the shapes we see, the geometry we experience may all be emergent properties. They arise because the universe is reading out its underlying information and presenting it in a way that feels physical. Just like a video game builds its world by rendering data into mountains, oceans, and NPCs who suspiciously repeat their dialogue, the universe might be rendering us into a world built from boundary data. This does not mean space is flimsy or unreliable. The mountains will not suddenly glitch. The walls will not flicker. It means that the stability we experience comes from deeper rules, not from space itself. What feels like a solid cosmic stage may be the byproduct of something more fundamental playing out behind the scenes. The real structure might live on that boundary, while space is the three-dimensional shadow it casts. Time becomes even stranger in this picture. We tend to think of time as a river flowing smoothly forward, carrying us along whether we like it or not. But a holographic universe suggests that time may not be a single universal flow. Instead, time could be something that emerges from the way information on the boundary changes. In the same way a flipbook creates the illusion of motion when its pages are turned, the universe might create the feeling of time passing by, rearranging its boundary information moment by moment. We experience the flipbook as a smooth animation, even though underneath it all is just a sequence of static images. If time emerges from change rather than existing as an independent dimension, it means the universe has no preference for past or future. Those are labels we apply to the way information is organized in our experience. The past is the record of previous boundary configurations. The future is the set of patterns that have not yet emerged. Time becomes less of an arrow and more of a storyline we interpret as movement. It is not the metronome of the cosmos. It is the audience's perception of how the music unfolds. One of the most intriguing consequences of this is that time might bend or stretch depending on how information is distributed. We already know that near massive objects, time slows down. But if time is an emergent property, then those slowdowns are not distortions of a universal clock. They are changes in how the boundary information translates into our experience of time. It is like watching a movie where certain scenes are played in slow motion, not because the world inside the movie slowed down, but because the director wanted you to pay attention. Space behaves similarly. Distance may not be a fixed property, but something that arises from the relationships between underlying bits of information. If those relationships shift, distance can stretch or shrink. In fact, the expansion of the universe itself, the steady drift of galaxies away from each other, might be the result of the boundary changing its encoding rules over cosmic time. What we call expansion could be the universe's way of continuously updating the projection, keeping the story moving forward. This all leads to a profound and slightly humorous realization. In a holographic universe, everything that feels fundamental might just be the universe's most convincing special effects. Space is the beautifully rendered backdrop. Time is the dramatic pacing. Matter and energy are the characters, and the real script, the raw code driving the plot, lives on a surface we will never experience directly. Yet none of this cheapens reality. In fact, it elevates it. It means the universe is far more intricate than a simple collection of objects floating in an empty void. It means the patterns behind the scenes are so rich, so finely tuned, so astonishingly interconnected, that they can produce the illusion of solidity, continuity, and depth with perfect reliability. It means that the universe is not just a place, it is a process, a performance, a continuous act of cosmic artistry. In this holographic perspective, we are not trapped in a false world. We are participants in a higher order reality whose true structure is simply unfamiliar to us. The walls of existence are not built from bricks, but from information woven so tightly that it becomes indistinguishable from experience. Whether or not holography is correct, the idea forces us to consider that space and time might not be the final word on reality, but rather the stunning stagecraft that makes the cosmic story possible. If the universe is truly holographic, then everything you interact with, from the atoms in your bones to the cereal floating dubiously in your morning bowl, might be a projection of information stored on a distant cosmic boundary. Not a metaphorical projection, not a poetic projection, but a literal one in the same sense that a three-dimensional hologram is encoded on a flat surface. This does not make your cereal any less crunchy or your spoon any less real. But it does mean that the physical world might be a kind of majestic reconstruction, a three-dimensional performance arising from a deeper informational script written somewhere you will never visit. To see how everyday matter fits into this picture, we need to start with the building blocks. Particles, the tiny ingredients that make up everything you have ever touched, are usually thought of as independent entities that zip around like enthusiastic toddlers hopped up on sugar. But in a holographic universe, they may be the emergent expressions of information encoded far away. Imagine each particle not as a self-contained thing, but as the visible flourish of an instruction written on a cosmic surface. It is like seeing a character appear on stage, while knowing the script for that character lives backstage. The idea becomes even more interesting when we consider forces. Forces are the connectors, the things that tell particles how to move, how to attract, how to repel, how to fling each other across the void with dramatic flair. In a holographic world, these forces may not arise from particles exchanging invisible messengers. Instead, they might be the geometric consequences of how information is organized on the boundary. Change the boundary data, and the forces shift accordingly, like pulling a thread in a tapestry and watching patterns ripple across the entire cloth. Let's bring this closer to home. Imagine tapping your finger on a table. You feel resistance, solidity, something undeniably present. But that sensation may come from the way your boundary-encoded information interacts with the boundary-encoded information of the table's atoms. The solidity is not a built-in property of the table. It is the result of two sets of instructions interfering in the interior projection, creating the sensory illusion of firmness. In other words, the universe might be really convincing improv theater, and you are both the actor and the audience. This interpretation gets even stranger when we look at familiar objects like light. Light behaves like a wave one day and a particle the next, and its identity crisis has haunted physics classrooms for generations. In the holographic perspective, this dual behavior might not be a glitch of the universe, but a feature. Light could be a sort of messenger translating boundary rules into interior experiences. Its flexibility, sometimes wave-like, sometimes particle-like, may reflect the flexibility of the underlying information that generates it. Electricity and magnetism become even more elegant under this view. Instead of being two separate phenomena with suspiciously intertwined personalities, they might be different boundary patterns projected into three-dimensional behavior. The swirling magnetic fields and racing electrons we measure inside space may actually be the holographic shadows of a more unified description living on the distant cosmic surface. It is a bit like discovering that two characters who seem unrelated in a movie are actually played by the same actor wearing different costumes. Even mass, the property that lets you have weight and prevents your cereal from floating away with dramatic enthusiasm, becomes reimagined. In a holographic universe, mass could be the result of how strongly a particular piece of boundary information resists being reshaped by nearby information. The more stubborn the boundary pattern, the heavier the particle appears in the interior. A heavy object inside the universe might simply correspond to a boundary instruction that refuses to budge, like that one relative who never changes their opinion no matter how many charts you bring to the argument. Take gravity too. It becomes less of a force and more of a geometric response. Instead of mass pulling on mass, gravity could arise from the way boundary information curves and intertwines. When you walk across your living room and feel your feet pressing down, you are not being pulled by the earth in the usual sense. You are experiencing how the holographic translation of Earth's boundary pattern influences the structure of space in your vicinity. It is gravity, yes, but gravity as a byproduct of information, not a primary ingredient. And what about the stuff that feels the most real, your own body, your thoughts, your memories? In a holographic picture, even these emerge from the interior interpretation of boundary data. The atoms that form your neurons, the electrical pulses that travel through them, the chemical patterns that let you remember where you left your keys, all of it arises from encoded information. This does not mean consciousness is an illusion. It means consciousness may be the universe expressing one of its most sophisticated boundary patterns in rich, three-dimensional detail. To make this feel less abstract, imagine an extremely advanced hologram. A hologram so perfect that the projected people talk, think, argue, laugh, eat breakfast, and wonder whether the universe is holographic. That is not a trick. That is emergence. The characters are real in the sense that their interactions, thoughts, and experiences unfold meaningfully within the projection. Likewise, in a holographic universe, you are not a simulation. You are an emergent expression of fundamental information arranged in staggeringly intricate ways. This perspective does not diminish the world. Your cereal does not become fake. Your hand does not become ghostly. Instead, everything becomes more interconnected, more elegant, more astonishing. Matter is not just matter. It is the universe performing a miraculous act of translation. Forces are not just forces. They are the shadows of deeper relationships. You are not just a physical structure. You are a pattern woven into reality with such finesse that you can look at the universe and ask what it is made of. In the holographic vision, everyday matter is not downgraded. It becomes the ultimate evidence that the universe is capable of turning pure information into living form. And that makes every spoonful of cereal a tiny, delicious reminder that reality has more layers than any of us ever asked for. If the holographic idea is even partly true, then the universe is not the solid, self-contained construction we like to imagine. Instead, it is something closer to a cosmic narrative, an unfolding story rendered from information that exists on a boundary we will never physically reach. And that thought sends philosophy, existentialism, and consciousness theory spiraling into a lively debate that feels like the universe just handed us a script and said, "Interpret this however you like." The consequences ripple outward in every direction, touching on meaning, identity, free will, and the unsettling possibility that the world is not built out of things at all, but out of relationships, patterns, and coded instructions. Let us begin with consciousness, the persistent mystery that stares back at us every morning in the bathroom mirror. In a traditional physical universe, consciousness is often explained as something that emerges from sufficiently complex arrangements of matter. Neurons fire, networks form, and awareness arises as a kind of grand chemical crescendo. But in a holographic universe, matter itself is emergent. It is the three-dimensional expression of deeper information. This means consciousness might not be a latecomer in the cosmic game. It may be woven into the informational structure of reality from the beginning. It could be a feature of the way the universe organizes itself, much like the way melodies appear naturally in music even before lyrics are written. This does not imply that consciousness is magical or supernatural. Instead, it suggests consciousness may be the universe examining its own informational structure from the inside. When you think, wonder, and reflect, you may be the universe interpreting itself, watching its own story play out through the eyes it created. That is not mystical, it is intimate. It means consciousness is a lens through which the universe experiences the narrative it continuously renders. Then comes the question of free will. If the universe is a projection of information encoded elsewhere, does that mean everything is predetermined? Is your decision to eat pancakes instead of toast already quietly written on the boundary like a cosmic footnote? Not necessarily. The holographic view does not demand a fixed script. Information can update, shift, and evolve. Think of it like a story that is being written as it unfolds, not one that is carved into marble. The boundary information may guide the structure, but the interior experience still contains genuine novelty, choice, and spontaneity. You are not acting out a predetermined movie. You are participating in ongoing authorship, improvising within a sophisticated rule set that keeps the plot coherent. Now zoom out to the universe as a whole. If reality is a projection, what does that make existence itself? One way to think about it is that reality is a kind of cosmic storytelling engine. The boundary encodes the rules and the raw information, and the interior is the unfolding narrative, the lived experience. This makes the universe feel less like a machine and more like literature. It is not random, yet not rigid. It is structured, yet expressive. And like every good story, it contains complexity, conflict, beauty, and moments where the characters pause and ask, "Wait, what exactly is happening here?" There is a poetic charm in imagining the universe this way. Instead of being a collection of objects floating in empty space, everything becomes part of an interconnected story. Galaxies swirl not because they are mechanical systems, but because the deeper informational patterns generate motions that look, from our perspective, like cosmic choreography. Life emerges because the informational landscape can support forms capable of self-reference. Consciousness blossoms because the universe is capable of observing its own unfolding structure. This perspective also changes how we view identity. If you are an emergent part of a story arising from a deeper layer of reality, then you are not confined to your body or brain. You are a pattern, a vast, intricate tapestry of relationships woven through time. Your memories, thoughts, and emotions are not just electrochemical states. They are the interior expression of boundary-level information arranged in extraordinary complexity. You are a chapter in the universe's narrative, but a chapter that actively writes itself. Of course, these ideas raise one of the most unnerving philosophical questions. If reality is a projection, does that make it less real? It is tempting to think so, but consider this. Does a movie become fake just because it is projected from a strip of film? Does music become less meaningful because it originates from vibrations? Reality is defined by experience, and our experience is undeniably rich, detailed, and consequential. A holographic universe is not a lesser universe. It is a layered one. The projection is not a trick. It is the method through which reality expresses itself. Perhaps the most profound consequence is what this means for meaning itself. If the universe is informational at its core, then meaning is not something humans invented. It is something the universe naturally produces. Patterns acquire structure. Structure acquires interpretation, and interpretation becomes meaning. Everything from the orbit of planets to the arc of your personal life can be understood as part of an ever-developing narrative, not merely an accident of drifting particles. A holographic universe does not shrink us. It places us inside a grander context where reality's deepest layer is not matter but story. And somehow that makes everything feel bigger, richer, and more worth exploring. We are not spectators watching the cosmos unfold on a screen. We are characters living in the story, shaped by it, contributing to it, and in moments of reflection, catching brief glimpses of the machinery behind the curtain. After wandering through black hole puzzles, quantum threads, cosmic boundaries, and philosophical rabbit holes deep enough to make your head spin like a confused planet, we can finally step back and view the entire holographic idea as a single sweeping panorama. And what a panorama it is, whether the universe is fundamentally a hologram or not. The journey through this concept gives us a new way to appreciate reality, one that is bigger, bolder, and far stranger than anything we normally allow ourselves to imagine. So let's take a moment to breathe, blink, and reorient ourselves. Here we stand on a tiny planet orbiting an average star, floating inside a galaxy that is itself only one brushstroke in a canvas of billions. We are living in a universe that might, at its deepest level, store everything on a boundary we can never reach. And yet here we are, touching, breathing, choosing, wondering. The fact that we can even ask the question, is the universe a hologram, is already a testament to how astonishingly intricate the universe is. Whatever this place is, it created beings capable of turning existence inside out just to understand it a little better. If the holographic idea is correct, then everything we see, feel, and experience is the universe's way of expressing information. Information so elegantly structured that it becomes indistinguishable from the world we know. Our reality would be a reconstruction so perfect, so seamless, so immersive, that we can live entire lives without ever suspecting it as being generated from something deeper. That level of craftsmanship would make even the most ambitious filmmakers, game designers, and artists bow respectfully. Forget 4K resolution. The universe would be doing projection on a scale that makes every pixel in your field of vision a masterpiece. But perhaps the greatest beauty of the holographic possibility is this: it does not diminish the universe, it magnifies it. A universe that emerges from information does not become less real. It becomes more layered, more textured, more mysterious. Instead of being a simple physical container, it becomes a rich narrative formed from relationships, structures, and patterns that intertwine at every level. It becomes a place where surface and depth are two sides of the same cosmic coin, and where reality is not a static object, but a creative process unfolding moment by moment. Think about that for a second. Every sunrise, every storm, every conversation, every heartbeat might be an expression of a deeper informational rhythm guiding the entire cosmos. The stars that scatter light across the night sky, the galaxies spinning like slow-motion fireworks, the mathematics humming quietly behind the scenes. All of it could be the outward performance of a hidden layer we can barely describe. And if that hidden layer exists, it is doing its job flawlessly because the universe feels profoundly, achingly real. Even if the holographic idea remains unproven, it gives us a metaphor for understanding the cosmos that is almost poetic. We are characters inside a story that is written on the edges of existence, not fictional characters, but emergent ones, born from rules, shaped by complexity, and capable of self-awareness. Every choice we make, every memory we hold, every dream we chase becomes part of that unfolding projection, woven into the fabric of the world with the same precision as the orbits of planets or the vibrations of particles. This perspective also highlights something remarkable. The universe, holographic or not, cares enough to maintain coherence. It does not glitch. It does not forget. It does not half-render the mountains or accidentally leave placeholder text in the sky. Reality works everywhere, for everyone, all the time. That is not trivial. That is astonishing. It means that whatever mechanism lies behind existence, whether it is a boundary of encoded information or something entirely different, it keeps the show running with absolute commitment. And what a show it is. Take a moment to consider the absurd scale of everything. The age of the universe stretching back farther than human imagination can comfortably grasp. The vastness of space spanning distances so immense they make our planet feel like a dust mote drifting in a sunbeam. The intricate dance of forces and particles assembling themselves into stars, planets, ecosystems, and minds capable of reflecting on the entire spectacle. Whether this is a projection or a direct physical reality, it is extravagant. It is overachieving. It is cosmic artistry at its finest. Best of all, the holographic idea reminds us that mystery is not a flaw, it is fuel. It keeps curiosity alive. It keeps exploration meaningful. It keeps science playful, daring, and endlessly creative. The universe has written a story that invites us to investigate, rewrite, and reinterpret it at every turn. And along the way, it leaves clues, glimmers of structure, whispers of symmetry, hints of something deeper, just enough to keep us wondering without ever giving everything away. So even if the universe is a hologram, it is the most breathtaking hologram imaginable, a masterpiece of precision and wonder, filled with color, motion, life, and questions that spark entire civilizations of thinkers. A projection so detailed that it becomes indistinguishable from reality itself. And if our cosmos truly works this way, then we are not just living in a universe, we are living in a work of art, painted across dimensions, rendered in light, narrated in time, and experienced through consciousness. Whatever lies beneath the surface, one thing is certain. The universe, holographic or not, is extraordinary, and we are lucky enough to be inside the story, reading it, writing it, and marveling at every page as it turns.